Okay, so we are here with Michelle Aravallo Carpenter. She is the co-founder and general partner at Impacto Capital, a locally rooted fund manager deploying catalytic capital across the Andean region. Currently, she is leading the design of a new impact investment fund focused on the Andean Amazon. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. So we're excited to talk a little bit more about this fund that you're developing, specifically focused around the Andean Amazon. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, of course. So maybe I should start by saying thank you for that wonderful bio read. And when I hear it back, I'm just wondering out loud if people do realize that I am a kind of like an unwilling impact investor. Some people say, "Oh, impact investing, was that your dream?" Actually, I was originally a human rights lawyer.
Really?
And then, life took me in so many paths. I ended up working with thousands of entrepreneurs to help them, to support them, incubate and accelerate their ideas so that they can solve public problems through the private sector and market-driven solutions. And really, the plan was never to invest. We were always we always thought, well, if we just show the world the magic of social entrepreneurs and the solutions they have, money will pour. And we definitely tried. We created this summit that brings in investors from abroad. We want to showcase all these incredible things that are happening in the Andean region, which is a region that is not as well known. It's Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia.
Right.
So we brought them in, and they all said, they all agreed, these are wonderful, beautiful projects. These are companies that are very viable, that are really changing people's lives, but we can't invest. Like, okay, why? And the answer is a bit technical, but it actually boils down to the financial instruments that they're designed for. So if you're sitting in an office in Miami with all the great intentions of setting up an impact investment fund, and they say, okay, you have to do this for Latin America, the first thing you think about is Mexico and Brazil, the two largest markets. And when you design for a larger market, you design differently. So that's when we realized that we had no other choice but to become impact investors and understand how to design investing solutions and financial instruments that fit the realities of smaller markets that are just as deserving, and so that we can invest in social entrepreneurs that are just as deserving to get a chance to grow, and of course, solutions that work really well. So that's a little bit of that background, because I was just hearing it back, and I sound way more professional than that. So, so Impacto Capital, we set it up as a platform for proximate local fund managers to invest locally as well. So that's kind of where we're all coming from. Right. So now this Andean Amazon solution, thank you so much for asking me about it. So we're actually in this process of, we've already deployed our first fund. It has terrific results. We're fundraising for our second fund to invest in even more social entrepreneurs in the Andean region. And in this process, we realized that we have this tremendous opportunity and also a beautiful challenge to design something for the Andean Amazon. And what this challenge means to us is that we get to really understand what the opportunities are and what is it that the international markets, or maybe global solutions that are designed from, just 10,000 feet, maybe from an airplane, mean, and what is it that they're missing from not being boots on the ground.
Yeah.
So that's what our idea is. We're in the early stages of this process, and the one thing that I have to say is that we really need to take up this opportunity and this chance, because there's urgency. The Andean Amazon is where the Andean glaciers, the Andean mountain range, is where the Amazon starts, if you think about it.
Right.
And the highest percentage of biodiversity of the Amazon rainforest is in the upper headwaters, mostly outside of Brazil.
Right.
And yet, most of the attention, my greatest colleagues that are doing incredible things, are all in the Brazilian side.
Right.
There's no trusted platform to invest for conservation in the Andean Amazon side. And we have an urgency to save the rainforest. We have an urgency to ensure that people have an alternative to illegal mining and extractive industries. and yet really there's nothing being done where the Amazon starts.
That's amazing. And so, like, because you said that you had to design this slightly differently. Could you tell us, like, what are the different ways that you had to make adjustments for this kind of fund to access solutions you're targeting?
Yeah, and I think we're designing it differently because we're seeing an opportunity that most others are missing. Actually, we know that we would have to build upon things that already exist. And when you observe the private sector in the Amazon, if you ask indigenous peoples, what do they think when they think of the private sector? You have to think about the private sector entering the Amazon only within the last century, and most often flanked by soldiers.
Oh, okay.
Right? Soldiers that are allowing the oil companies to come in, soldiers that are allowing the mining and companies to come in. So their idea of the private sector is quite skewed. If we think about it, private sector is what gives us our coffee in the morning and what gives us like this wonderful bar of chocolate. That's what the private sector is to most people in an urban setting.
Right.
And then we realized, okay, but there is private sector activity within these communities. They just think of it in a different way. It may not be the most efficient way, but actually it is the most regenerative way. So we've actually observed that there's different value chains that have a lot of promise. For example, non-timber forest products, fruits that you would never pick up in the grocery store because you don't even know how to eat them.
Yeah.
They are superfoods. They have incredible components, and if you turn them into a great juice, maybe you can start drinking it, like what happened with acai, which was largely unknown, and now it's just this like superfruit that everyone wants to have.
Yeah.
So what this opportunity that we're seeing is to actually, instead of investing more in the existing solutions, there's, for example, associations of regenerative cacao growers that grow cacao within forest settings. So you have this incentive to keep the forests alive or to plant new forests. That cacao is ancestral cacao that should not be sold in a big sack at the commodity price.
Right.
This specialty cacao should be sold to the finest chocolatiers in Japan and in Belgium and in Paris.
Because of the volumes that it's produced in.
Exactly. Okay. It's such small volumes, and the biodiversity of cacao is the same as the biodiversity of grapes within wines.
Right.
So why would you get this beautiful Chardonnay grape and maybe sell it as a commodity in a supermarket? You would never do that.
Right.
So you should never do the same with cacao. So that is an opportunity, a golden opportunity there for us and for these smallholder farmers. So what we want to do is we want to invest upstream. That is the main difference of how we design. Most funds think of it as portfolios. So you just have like a bunch of companies in the same industry. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one value chain that is food-based or forest-based, and then we're going to invest upstream. Mid-market companies, the right logistics companies, certifiers, distributors, all the way to retail to ensure that more and more value gets captured for the smallholder farmers. We see so many things sometimes in like the high-end markets, and you're wondering out loud, okay, if I'm really paying more for this chocolate, how much of it is really going to the smallholder farmers? And what we do is we ensure that that's value that is being paid more by the end consumer actually makes it all the way to the smallholder farmers so that they have all the incentives in the world to continue preserving the Amazon.
That's brilliant. Because I guess a lot of people won't know that a lot of producers don't have this kind of support, like getting access to market. So that makes it quite novel, like your fund, to be able to really give them support through the whole value chain. Yes,
exactly. I mean, I know it's like maybe it sounds a bit nerdy, really, but we're so passionate about it because we can see the real value. I spoke with a family of cacao farmers. In January, and they were saying, well, it's 700 of us, and we're losing families in our association every year because sometimes the price goes up, sometimes the price goes down. They work so hard in such difficult conditions, so hot and humid, and these are ancestral cacao, so you actually have to kind of like go up a tree to harvest. It's not none of these like easy, right. Generic or genetically modified cacaos. It's just this very difficult ancestral way of doing it. So they're saying, the young people, they get tired. And then you have these illegal gold miners that come in, they give you $20,000 cash to let, they say, hey, let me till your river, let me destroy your hectares. These will grow again, but you get cash up front.
Right.
So of course it's a no-brainer. If you think about it, you're thinking, oh, maybe I could send my kid to university. Maybe I could, cure my grandmother of this ailment. Of course you want to make sure that you do that. So, and that's why it's so urgent. Illegal gold mining is destroying the Andean Amazon at unprecedented rates, and we need to do something about it.
Why do you think it's really important to have Indigenous-led initiatives so central to the work that you're doing in the Amazon and the fund?
There's two levels, right? There's the normative level, right? And at the level, Indigenous-led initiatives honor a sense of justice to what is essentially their land. So there's that normal level, and that's why it's important in my heart.
Yeah.
And of course, then there's also my brain and my financial brain, right? And it really is the most efficient way. So if we're designing a fund that invests in the Amazon, and we know that money, capital, tends to operate in a different way as nature, right? We have a conundrum. And the way we solve that conundrum is to engage with Indigenous-led initiatives. Indigenous people know how to harvest the forest. You cannot bring in a workforce from abroad to come into the Amazon and try to go up those trees and harvest that beautiful fruit, and because we don't even know or understand the cycles of harvest within the Amazon because it's a forest.
Yeah.
But Indigenous people have lived there for ancestral times, and they understand it, and they are our guides for how can we, in a respectful, regenerative way, harvest the fruits of this forest for good. But we have to let them lead, and we have to trust them. So I think that the gap in efficiency, the gap in investment that goes to regenerative solutions is the same gap as the gap of trust. And you just have to take a leap of faith. I was just talking to a gentleman here at TED, and was explaining to him that, it's a different level, profile of risk, the type of fund that we're designing in the Amazon than one we're designing for urban centers. And he's like, yeah, well, it sounds very risky. I was like, yeah, but VC is incredibly risky.
Right.
You see people pouring billions into AI not knowing if it's going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Every single day. And nobody's wondering that. So I think it's a matter of values, it's a matter of trust, and it's also a matter of understanding, like, what are you willing to risk to protect the lungs of the earth? And if your answer is very little, then maybe we shouldn't be talking, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I should be talking to people that really understand how to adjust that risk and help us interpret that risk in a better way so we can attract commercial capital. I am in some conversations with some foundations that are very curious about how might they deploy some of their philanthropic grants into this type of funds so that we can blend the finance and blend the level of risk so that we can attract some more commercial capital and really build these markets. If we manage to do this for 3 value chains, it doesn't end there. We're actually changing the entire narrative about what the forest is good for in the minds of voters in urban areas across the Andean region.
Amazing. I love that you talk about trust. Is this something that you can talk a little bit more about? Did you find it really difficult in building trust with potential investors, or is there something that you found that's works to bridge that gap?
Well, I think it depends on the profile of investor. Because when I speak with other local investors or business leaders, and we're talking just at the level of finance and spreadsheets, you would think all finance and spreadsheets are the same.
Right.
But actually, you think about it, where we put the capital is where we're signaling where our values are. What is it that we value? So for local investors, I've spoken to a patriarch of a family business in the Andean region who said, hey, I'm so sad that my grandchildren don't want to stay here. I wish I could do more to build here locally so that they have, I don't know, this like the same dreams that I had about building something locally. And that's valuable for him at this point in his time, thinking about his legacy. So that's where his capital went. In terms of international investors, I think that one of the things that builds trust is them understanding that there are platforms like Impacto Capital, right? So someone who is from Ecuador, who understands the region, who sees resilience where most people see risk, to be there to act as translators of risk for them, and that allows them to trust in this process a little bit more than perhaps before, where you have people that may or may not be local or may not really understand who the actors are or how the profile of risks or even regulations work. And then, of course, the combination of both. I think that local people love to see that international people find the value in the type of investments we do.
Right.
But also, international people feel great that there's local people who understand the rules, regulations, and industries locally to co-invest in. So they de-risk each other, and of course, that allows people to have trust. So yeah, it's a really beautiful way to think about it. Yes, investment is spreadsheets and finances and business models, but really at the core of it is understanding how do you pull the right levers and how do you create the right incentives for trust to flourish.
So you've talked a little bit about, like, I guess the external view of local solutions and the building trust. But what's the biggest misconception about protecting the Amazon rainforest today that you think that we might not have covered?
I think it is a misconception because I've seen a few people come to this aha moment. The biggest risks to the Andean Amazon right now is in illegal mining. So there has been a very big push to stop money laundering in our region. Money laundering used to happen mostly through real estate and maybe cars and luxury goods and, the usual money laundering industries. And at some point, I think those who do money laundering realize that while all the security eyes are placed on ports and cities, like, and places that are, the transit places, places like the Amazon get to have very little state control. And drug traffickers are private sector actors, illicit, but private sector.
Yeah.
And they're very mobile, and they understand very quickly that price of gold is going up. Nobody's looking at these rivers aside from indigenous peoples. All you need is a few people with guns to keep them quiet, and you do your illegal gold mining. That is an absolute disaster right now. I am surprised that there's no more coverage of it in the international news, and that really I have not seen a concerted effort to stop it. Why is this a misconception? The misconception is that you need more regulation. I understand that a lot of our conservation friends are just thinking, oh, how do you do more regulation, more programs, more philanthropic money? Those are all really good efforts. But the most important misconception is that you can fight a private sector illicit actor with public sector strategies. Because by the time they end up regulating that, they've already figured out some other way to do it. I think that you need a private sector strategy as well. I'm not saying instead of, but a private sector strategy that complements all of these other strategies, so that when you ask a young indigenous man to give up his lifestyle for $20,000 and give up all of his land for $20,000, then he'll say, no way, because what grows in here is gold. Cacao is gold. Acai is gold. Coffee is gold. And it does, and it's regenerative, and it keeps on giving, and it's in tune with nature. I will never give up. That is actually how you counter this. Creating the right incentives, not prohibiting more. Of course, you should definitely prohibit more, but if you just prohibit, then you're not giving people alternatives, and that's the bet we're placing in the Amazon.
That's brilliant. How can people support your work?
Well, at this point, we are interested in hearing more from actually mid-market and retail companies that would be open to creating their own business models with Amazonian products. We'd be super happy to engage with them. We are also looking to publish within the next year a pipeline study and a report that all investors can have access to, so that we can have a better understanding of what are the regenerative investment opportunities within the Andean Amazon. And yeah, just follow us at Impacto Capital. We're always happy to connect and continue weaving and building up this market together.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week. We really hope you enjoyed this episode.
If you did, please hit the follow button to make sure that you get next week's release. While you're at it, please leave a rating and a review.
Now, let's shout out to our fabulous team behind the pod.
Executive produced by Josie Colter.
Produced by Ben Beheshty.
Music also by Ben Beheshty.
Communications by Tara Cooper and Izzy Gladstone.
Curation by Deesha Chandra.
Hosted by Ben Hurst.
And Maryam Pasha.
And remember,
stay curious.